The courtroom was quiet except for the soft scratch of a pen moving across paper, and in that simple moment a man signed the divorce papers with a smile, a careless confident smile, because he believed he was finally freeing himself from a woman he thought was nothing. He did not know that the quiet woman sitting beside him was the hidden heir to a trillion-dollar empire, and within minutes the entire room would realize that the person everyone underestimated was the most powerful one there. Her name was Elena, and for years she had lived a life that looked painfully ordinary. She wore simple clothes, she rarely spoke loudly, and she never tried to impress anyone, especially her husband Daniel, a man who loved attention, power, and the admiration of others. Daniel was a successful lawyer with expensive suits, powerful friends, and a reputation for always winning. People admired his confidence and feared his influence, and over time that admiration slowly turned into arrogance, the kind of arrogance that blinds a person to the truth standing right in front of them. When he first met Elena years earlier, she worked quietly in a small library. She spoke gently and listened more than she talked. Daniel liked that about her in the beginning because it made him feel important. It made him feel like the center of the world. But as the years passed, that same quiet nature began to irritate him. He started to see her silence as weakness, her patience as lack of ambition, and her simple life as proof that she would always depend on him. The truth was something completely different, but Elena had never felt the need to explain it, not even to her husband. Elena had grown up far away from the city, in a quiet place surrounded by mountains and old trees. Her childhood was peaceful but complicated, because her family carried a secret so large that it shaped every decision they made. Her grandfather had built one of the largest private financial empires in the world, a global network of investments, companies, and hidden assets that quietly influenced entire markets, but he believed wealth should never control a person's character, so he raised Elena with strict values, humility, patience, and discipline. When she turned 18, she became the legal heir to a fortune so large that even governments respected its influence, but her grandfather gave her one unusual rule before he died. He told her she must live like an ordinary person for many years. She must learn who people truly are when money is not involved. Only then would she be ready to carry the responsibility of such power. Elena accepted that promise seriously. She moved to the city with no bodyguards, no expensive cars, and no public connection to her family's empire. She studied quietly, worked ordinary jobs, and built a life where no one knew the truth. That was when she met Daniel. In the beginning, Daniel was charming and attentive. He admired her calm personality and said her kindness made him feel peaceful. Elena believed him. She believed love was possible even in a life built on secrecy, and for a while their marriage felt warm and hopeful. But slowly Daniel changed. Success made his ego grow, his words became sharper, his patience shorter, and he began treating Elena as if she were a burden rather than a partner. It started with small things, mocking her simple job, criticizing her clothes, laughing at her quiet personality in front of his friends. Elena remained calm through all of it, not because she was weak but because she understood something Daniel did not. Patience often reveals the truth more clearly than anger. Years passed this way, and the distance between them grew larger every day, until finally Daniel decided he was done. He told Elena he deserved someone more ambitious, someone more impressive, someone who matched his growing status in society. Elena listened quietly that night, her face calm but her heart heavy. Sadness sat inside her chest like a quiet weight, because despite everything she had once loved this man sincerely. When Daniel filed for divorce, he did it confidently, almost proudly, as if he were correcting a mistake rather than ending a marriage. He even joked to his colleagues that he was finally escaping a life of boredom. Now they sat together in the courtroom where the final papers waited on the table. The judge reviewed the documents calmly while a few lawyers observed from the side. Daniel leaned back comfortably, tapping his pen against the desk with casual impatience. Elena sat beside him in a simple white suit, her hands resting quietly in her lap. The judge looked at both of them and asked if they understood the agreement. Daniel answered quickly with a confident smile. Elena nodded softly without speaking. The document was simple. Daniel would keep the apartment, the cars, and most of the visible assets. Elena had not asked for anything. When Daniel saw that, he laughed quietly and looked at her with a mixture of pity and amusement. "You see," he said softly but loudly enough for the room to hear, "this is exactly why our marriage never worked. You never knew how to fight for anything." Elena said nothing. Her silence only made him smile more. The judge handed Daniel the pen first. Without hesitation he signed the papers in a quick confident motion. Then he leaned back in his chair and pushed the document toward Elena with a dramatic gesture. "Your turn," he said, still smiling. Elena picked up the pen slowly. For a moment her hand paused above the paper. There was sadness in her eyes, not because she feared losing anything material, but because she knew something Daniel did not. Once this paper was signed, the truth she had hidden for years would finally come into the open. She signed her name quietly. The judge stamped the document and closed the file. "The divorce is finalized," he said calmly. Daniel stood up immediately, adjusting his expensive jacket with satisfaction. "Well," he said with a light laugh, "that was easier than I expected." But just as he turned to leave, the courtroom door opened again. Several people walked inside, men and women dressed in formal business suits. Their presence immediately changed the atmosphere in the room. At their center was an older man carrying a thick leather folder. The judge looked up with confusion. The man approached Elena respectfully and spoke in a calm professional tone. "Miss Elena Volkov," he said, "we apologize for the interruption, but the board requires your signature on the inheritance activation documents." The entire room went still. Daniel stopped walking and slowly turned around. "What did he say?" he asked quietly. Elena looked up at the man and nodded gently. The man opened the folder and placed several official documents on the table. The judge adjusted his glasses and began reading the title on the first page. His eyebrows slowly lifted in disbelief. The document confirmed the legal transfer of control over a global financial trust valued at over $1 trillion. The beneficiary was Elena Volkov. Daniel stared at the papers as if the words refused to make sense. The older man continued speaking calmly, explaining that Elena had officially reached the final condition of her grandfather's inheritance agreement. The years of living as an ordinary citizen had ended, and now she was required to assume leadership of the international investment network her family created. The room was silent except for Daniel's slow, uneven breathing. His confident smile had disappeared completely. He looked at Elena, as if seeing her for the first time. This is a joke," he said weakly. Elena looked at him quietly, her expression calm, not proud, not angry, simply calm. "No," she said softly, "it isn't." The lawyers in the room began whispering to each other. Even the judge looked stunned. Daniel stepped closer to the table, his voice suddenly desperate. "Elena, why didn't you tell me?" he asked. She thought about that question for a moment. Then she answered gently. "Because I needed to know who you were without money." The words hung in the air like a quiet truth no one could ignore. Daniel lowered his head slowly, the weight of realization finally reaching him. For years he had mocked, belittled, and abandoned the very person who held unimaginable power. But Elena did not smile, she did not celebrate, and she did not insult him in return. Instead she simply stood up calmly as the advisors around her prepared the documents. Her patience had revealed everything that anger never could. As she walked toward the courtroom door, the judge and the lawyers watched in silence. Daniel remained standing behind the table, surrounded by the papers he had signed with such confidence only minutes earlier. The door closed softly behind Elena, and in that quiet moment everyone in the room understood something simple and unforgettable. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is carrying a story so powerful that the world only discovers it when it is already too late.